Recently, I got really into Danganronpa, and ever since completing the series, it's made me think a lot about luck. I promise to keep this short, don't click away yet. In the first game, you play as Makoto Naegi as he tries to survive a killing game that he's been forced to participate in. He, like every other participant in the game, is a student of Hope's Peak Academy, and were each scouted to join the school based on their unique abilities, putting them at the top of their fields. You have the ultimate baseball player, ultimate pop idol, ultimate moral compass, ultimate programmer, etc. Some of them are pretty tangible, some of them less so. Makoto is the ultimate lucky student, a unique designation that the school hands out annually to one random student with no other distinguishable skills, based on the assumption that only an incredibly lucky person would win the lottery. Throughout the game, Makoto's luck is a defining feature of his character. Things that might kill anybody else just fail to kill him, and he often lucks his way into pretty vital clues. Throughout the series, luck is treated like a skill that can be targeted or weaponized. In the second game, Nagito Komaeda has the same skill, and is able to use it to set traps that would only work if he got real lucky. In a killing game where some of the other players are ultimate assassins, swordmasters, analysts, and Yakuza bosses, you'd think that luck as a skill would rank somewhere around like ultimate magician or ultimate fashionista. Instead, luck is one of the most powerful abilities. And it made me wonder, what does it mean to be lucky? Luck is a weird concept to consider because, by definition, it's not really something you can quantify or gain or train or anything like that. It's arguably not even real. Some games try to incorporate it as if it's an actual skill, such as The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, where it's an attribute that you can put points into that doesn't directly govern any skills. Instead, it provides hidden buffs, as well as giving you better odds when outcomes are being determined by random chance, like whether a repair hammer is going to break. In games like Danganronpa, it's just a narrative tool. Each character has a special skill that they can use to twist the odds in their favor, such as the ultimate affluent prodigy having unique knowledge from prior to the game thanks to his powerful family. The ultimate lucky student can deliberately weaponize their luck to get an outcome that they want, such as volunteering to play a game like Russian roulette for additional information, knowing that they can win a game of chance due to their overwhelming good fortune. In still others, luck is technically a factor but can be brute force to get the same outcome, such as finding shiny Pokemon. At full odds, a shiny Pokemon only has a 1 in 4,096 chance of spawning in the current games, a 0.02% chance, but through things like the shiny charm, manipulating swarms, shiny sandwich powers, etc., you can get those odds as low as 1 in 512, a comparatively much more manageable 0.19% chance. If you want a shiny hunt, you can just keep brute forcing the system until one eventually shows up. Luck might determine how long that actually takes you, but at the end of the day, you can keep trying over and over to get a better outcome if you want. In games with random matchmaking, luck is often invoked as an excuse for why someone can't get ahead. We've all heard someone in bronze make the claim that they're not bad at Overwatch, guys. They just have bad luck. They're really good, they swear. You know, they just constantly get matched up with teammates who are bad, and against better teams, it's just Blizzard's matchmaking is dog shit. In that kind of case, we usually just chalk it up to delusional excuses for poor rank. You know, we say, matchmaking isn't RNG plucking 10 random players out of the ether. It's picking 10 people of roughly equivalent skill, and if you're better than the average player at your rank, you'll rank up eventually, and vice versa. Now, I am not a lucky person. Honestly, it's the opposite. I'm the kind of person where things go wrong to such an implausible degree that people are suspicious that I must be hiding some secretly awful trait about myself because there's just no other explanation. I've always been someone who believed that luck was a thing and that I just didn't have it. And then Pokemon Violet came out. Now, one thing I have always been lucky with is that no matter how broken a game is, I really rarely ever experience it. Like Cyberpunk 2077 never crashed on me, never had a game-breaking bug, nothing. And I played that shit on day one. Pokemon Violet was the same way for me. I had friends crashing left and right and losing hours of progress, but I mostly had a pretty good time with it. But that's not really what made me want to decide to talk about luck. What made me decide to talk about luck is all these goddamn shinies I've been finding, because it's at a point where my friends are just resentful of me for it. As of time of recording, Sunday, December 4th, I have played for about 105 hours, and I have found 29 shinies. I found my Fletchling and Azrael in the starting area before even getting to the first city, and then I found my Rookidee right after completing my first Starfall Street base. At this point, low-key, was already losing my mind a little bit. I have only ever found a single legit shiny Pokemon in the wild in a main series Pokemon game, and that was a shiny Shinx in Legends Arceus. Finding 3 of them when I wasn't even looking for them and at full odds made me think I should go buy a lottery ticket. Then came Flittle. Then came a pair of Kilowattrels in the same swarm that I wasn't even hunting. Then came Rufflet. Then came 2 back-to-back Gibbles that I found just wandering around together right after I entered the crater in the endgame. Then came Hoppip, then Magikarp. Then on one day, I found a shiny Snorunt, Fortress, Grievard, and 2 shiny Frostlasses. I got the shiny charm between the Fortress and the Grievard, and then found 2 shiny Pommies, another Grievard, a Dracloak, a Lokix, a Noibat, a Magneton, a another Magikarp, and 5 Charcadets. Full disclosure, I used shiny sandwiches for the Charcadets, or at least some of them, and the Flittle, Kilowattrels, Frostlasses, Pawmies, Dracloak, Noibat, Magneton, and Charcadets all came from mass outbreaks. I only really started actively shiny hunting after getting the shiny charm, because at that point I accepted that this is just my fate in this game. With each new shiny, my friends have gone from, being excited for me to like almost suspicious of me, and I can't really blame them. It sounds fake. It sounds like I'm, pretending that I'm not hunting them when I really am or something. I was on a call with one of my friends when I found that first shiny Gibble, and she was excited for me. And then I found the second one like 5 minutes later, and the tone shifted from, wow, that's incredible, to, Viv, what the fuck are you doing to find all these things? And look, am I just making this video because I want to brag about my shiny Pokemon? It'd be a lie to say no. Ever since the pair of Gibbles, I've been trying to think about how to make a video that would kind of allow me to show off these shinies that I could also tie into a greater topic, and between that and Danganronpa, I realized I wanted to make a video about luck. What it means, what it does, and why we love to invoke it in games. To start with, what is luck? It's actually kind of hard to pin down. In some cases, it's treated as something random that supersedes skill on occasion but isn't like a consistent force. You weren't good at a game, but you got a lucky shot, or you weren't bad at a game, but just had some bad luck. Sometimes we treat it like some sort of cosmic entity that's getting involved in our little games and putting a finger on the scale in our favor, such as when you take a guess based on nothing but hope and end up striking gold. Sometimes it's treated almost like a consistent, inherent stat that everybody has that we bring with us into a game. As if every player in an Overwatch match has a luck level between 1 and 100, and the luckier you are, the more likely you are to win a 1v1 Widow matchup where you're on a skill parity, or survive a fight with 1 HP, or hit that fully charged alt fire from Zenyatta to obliterate an enemy you hadn't even seen. Other times, it's not a static value, but a variable one that can come and go at random. You might say you have a lucky night when all your games go the way you want, or you might say you had an unlucky night when it just seems like nothing will go right. Sometimes we even treat it as something that exists to redress some karmic imbalance or injustice, like the idea that you'll eventually get some good luck if you've had a string of bad luck, or that you'll experience bad luck as a consequence of being a bad person. As well, we might say somebody's on a lucky streak, if they catch a bunch of shiny Pokemon, for example, they might be told to go buy a lottery ticket. It's actually a really fascinating subject to explore because all of us have a different relationship to our luck, and luck is a concept. I know people who are just permanently lucky. They get job offers for jobs they didn't even apply for, they've always been able to find friends, they manage to find cheap housing, and they just never seem to get the short end of the stick. Some of them recognize their luck, but honestly a lot don't. Either because they genuinely don't see it because they're too close to the reality that they live in, or because they'd just rather believe that it was hard work that got them where they are. On the flip side, I know people who've just always had terrible luck, and I'd consider myself among them. Whether it's, friends, relationships, jobs, even just the little things, I never have good luck. Like, I need to be super careful with my phone because I know if I drop it, it's gonna shatter, probably before it even hits the ground. And when it comes to video games, this can get even more interesting because we often can find the exact odds of a given outcome. Like, when I'm putting out a video on YouTube, for example, I can't quantify my odds of it getting viewed by anybody. I know I'm very lucky as a small creator when my videos do get views because the odds of that are low, but I can't quantify what the full odds are in terms of like actual numbers or what other factors might have influenced whether or not I'm actually dealing with full odds. In contrast, when it comes to shiny Pokemon, I know the exact odds for every shiny encounter I've had. For Fletchling, Azurill, Rookidee, Rufflet, the Gibbles, Hoppip, the first Magikarp, Snorunt, and Fortress, I had a 1 in 4,096 chance of encountering them. For Flittle, the Kilowattrels, the Greavards, Lokix, and Magikarp 2, the odds were 1 in 1,366. For the Frostlasses, Pawmies, Dracloak, Noibat, and Magneton, the odds were 1 in 820. For the Ceruledges, the first one that I caught was right at the start of a mass outbreak, so that one was 1 in 1,366, but the others were all caught with a level 3 shiny power at the end of a mass outbreak, so their odds were only 1 in 512 each. Now, you might be thinking in response to all of this, okay, but it's pretty easy to encounter a lot of Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Statistically, you are pretty likely to eventually hit some shinies. And in theory, you're correct. If you encounter 4,096 Pokemon, you would expect to, based on the odds, encounter 4,095 regular ones and 1 shiny. If I had been encountering each of my shiny Pokemon only after encountering the exact number of non-shiny Pokemon from their species and at their respective odds, this wouldn't be an abnormal number of shinies if I had encountered about 60,000 Pokemon. My Switch says that I've played Pokemon for 105 hours, so that'd mean I would need to encounter about 6.3 Pokemon for every second of game time in order to hit that number. Now, a lot of Pokemon spawn in the overworld in Scarlet and Violet, but even with that, that's a lot. That would be a pretty high number of Pokemon to encounter. However, this is also all operating under the assumption that the odds are cumulative, and anyone who's ever tried to shiny hunt can tell you from experience, they are not. You are at the mercy of the game, and if the game decides to have no mercy, it might take you hours to find one, if you find one at all. And let's not even get into how painful it can be to try and get a good shiny. Shiny Pokemon happen because whenever a new Pokemon is spawned into the world, the game basically rolls a die with 4,096 sides. If you roll a 1, Pokemon's shiny. Congrats! But it's important to remember that there's only one die being rolled each time it's checking for a shiny. It's not doing a Monopoly thing where it's rolling 2 dice. And past outcomes don't influence future ones. The odds are still 1 in 4,096 every time you roll that die. And this is where we move into the second section of this video. What does luck do? In Pokemon, it's possible to increase your odds for a shiny Pokemon by getting to roll the 4,096-sided die multiple times. When a new Pokemon is being spawned at full odds, the only new variable that needs to be created is the new Pokemon's personality values. That is where the dice roll is happening. If you have the shiny charm though, the game allows you to re-roll the personality value up to 2 times. If you either run out of re-rolls or roll a personality value that generates a shiny, then it stops re-rolling and spawns whatever Pokemon it ended up with. While it's often talked about in terms of giving you better odds of spawning a shiny, it's better to think of it as being given more chances to get a good roll rather than a better chance of winning. If that seems like a distinction without a difference, visualize it in terms of rolling with advantage in a game of Dungeons & Dragons versus rolling with a lower requirement. For the unfamiliar, in D&D, you roll dice to determine the outcomes of various actions. Your Dungeon Master will say something like you need a 15 to succeed at this action you want to take, and you roll the dice and you see what you get. If we're talking about being given better odds of winning, we'd be talking about like, instead of that being 15, the Dungeon Master moving it down to a 12. You have better odds of winning in that scenario. Whereas what's happening with Pokemon is more like rolling with advantage, which means that you get to roll the same dice twice and you just end up using whichever number is highest. You're still rolling the same dice twice, so you have the same odds in each roll, but since you're rolling the dice twice and getting to take the higher outcome, you have 2 chances to get the outcome you want rather than 1. This is different than, say, a game of poker, where the odds of any card showing up in a player's hand or on the board is affected by which cards have already been dealt or burned. If you're playing Texas Hold'em poker, there are 52 cards in the deck. If you are the first person being dealt to, then you have a 1 in 52 chance of getting any card in the deck. But if you're the second person, your odds are already a bit up in the air because you have better than not odds of getting a different card value than what the first person got, since there's only 3 of that one left compared to 4 of everything else, and of getting a different suit than what the first person got, since there's only 12 of that suit compared to 13 for the other 3 suits. If there's, let's say, 5 players, there will be 42 cards left in the deck by the time everyone's hand is dealt. Let's say you have a pair of aces in your hand. You don't know what other cards have been dealt, but you know that you have the aces of hearts and spades. After the cards are dealt, there's an initial round of betting, but the winner of a game of Texas Hold'em is based on who has the highest value 5-card hand. Since you only know 2 cards, you really don't know what your odds are, but you do know that you have a pair of aces as a baseline. After that first round, the dealer burns the top card from the deck, which means that it's discarded without being shown to anyone, meaning there's now 41 cards left in the deck, and you are none the wiser about what's still in play. Then comes the flop, where the dealer will show the next 3 cards from the top of the deck. Let's say they are the Ace of Clubs, Jack of Diamonds, 10 of Hearts. Your 5-card hand now has some decent value, with a 3 of a kind with the aces plus the Jack and the 10 as kickers. At this point, betting begins again. Right now, you know that you can beat anyone who's relying on high card, pair, 2 pairs, or 3 of a kind. You could, however, be beaten by a straight, a flush, a full house, 4 of a kind, or a straight flush. None of those options are off the table yet, but your odds are looking pretty good. And this is where strategy starts to come into play for poker. Did anyone react in a particularly dramatic way to that flop? If they're good, they'll have been stone-faced regardless. That's the poker face. Is anyone starting to bet heavily? If yes, you have to start asking yourself whether you think they're bluffing. After all, they could already have a straight with the cards that are on the table and feel pretty confident in it. Or maybe they only have a 2 pair and the confidence is misplaced. Or maybe it's just a bluff to see who's willing to fold early. But let's say nobody's folded after this first round of betting, so another card is burned, and the 4th card, called the turn, is revealed to be a 4 of diamonds. Now everyone knows a little bit more about where they stand, including you. There is no chance for a straight flush anymore, so that risk to you is gone. A player with a king and a queen still has their straight from before, but anyone who's hoping for a flush, full house, or 4 of a kind is relying on this final card, and that is a risky bet. At this point, you know what 6 of the original 52 cards are, and what's more, people with worse hands will have started folding, indicating that they didn't have anything good. But that doesn't mean you're out of the woods yet. The remaining players are staying in for a reason, and you're going to have to deduce why. Does anyone have a king-queen hand? Is there someone who's banking it all on the river? Is there someone who really doesn't have anything who's just hoping to bluff their way to the win? Maybe nobody's really betting very big, so people are deciding they can afford to stick around for the river even without a great hand. If you're playing against me, you're probably going to hear me asking if I can quickly Google the rules so I know if my hand is good, and you have to decide whether I'm an idiot, bluffing, or both. And now it's time for one last card to be burned before we reveal the river, and King of Spades. Okay, so now things might not be great for you. On one hand, the only hand that can still beat you is a straight. Every other higher value hand is off the table. On the other hand, all that anyone needs for a straight is now a queen, and you have no way of knowing where any of the 4 queens are. All you know is that they're not in your hand or on the board, which means any player you're playing against might have one, or none of them might. And it's time to make a decision. Do you play hard? Do you fold in the face of an opponent who's betting big because you assume that they've got the queen, or do you hold on because you think they might be betting big because they've got a 3 of a kind of jacks and you're going to make them feel stupid? Are they just bluffing? This is why Texas Hold'em is a massive competitive game, whereas something like roulette, which is also pretty luck dependent, isn't. Roulette is pure random chance. There is no element of skill that a player can bring to the table, and since the odds aren't cumulative, you can't use any past knowledge to try and play strategically. You can choose how risky you want to play, but at the end of the day, it's all about luck. Poker, by contrast, is obviously a pretty luck-heavy game. Once that deck is shuffled, you can't do anything to change which cards you or your opponents will be given, which ones are going to appear on the board, which ones will get burned, and which ones won't get played at all. But that doesn't mean it's pure luck. It's a pretty strong social game. There are mechanics that influence the outcome that are skill-based. How well can you read somebody's reactions? Have you watched them play before? Do they have any habits that you can exploit? And how good is your own mental math? You can't guarantee which card is going to come up next, but you can take some educated guesses if you can crunch the numbers. This is especially exploitable in a game like Blackjack, where you can count cards and absolutely play the odds in your favor, although casinos do not look kindly upon you for doing so. Now, we've gotten a little ways away from shiny Pokemon, so let's bring it back to the original topic, luck in video games. When it comes to shiny Pokemon, we know that it's pretty much pure luck unless you're trading for shiny values and all that. You can give yourself more chances to roll the die, but that die will still have 4,096 sides on it every time you roll it, and you still need a 1 to get a shiny. However, let's look at a totally different game, Overwatch. See, I promise I can tie anything into this game if you just let me. Overwatch is overwhelmingly a skill-based game, but it does still involve some luck. For example, if you're playing comp solo queue, you're relying on luck for your teammates and opponents. But unlike what some people seem to believe, if you're better than the rank that you're in, you have an advantage here because you only need to roll the dice 4 times for your team, other team needs to roll it 5. If you're a gold 5, but your true skill is closer to like diamond 5 or even masters 5, then any team you're on that's playing at a gold 5 tier already has the balance tipped in your favor. We also have to consider really small scale luck. Like let's say you're playing Sombra and trying to shoot Widowmaker from 10 meters away. Widow's got that skinny scoliosis figure that Overwatch loves to give its female characters, and Sombra's gun has pretty solid spread at that range. In this case, even though you are aiming your gun, it is still mechanical. You're still relying on some degree of luck when it comes to whether your gun will actually choose to fire at points within its spread radius that Widowmaker occupies, and whether it even might hit a couple of headshots in the process. And then there's the other kind of luck. The kind where a Hanzo fires an arrow through a choke point and manages to hit a headshot on someone who hadn't even come around the corner when he'd shot. Or where a Sombra tries to hack his Zenyatta and he panic fires and accidentally manages to hit her and interrupt the hack. Or where D.Va goes to defense matrix a teammate and accidentally swallows a grab. How do we really define that kind of luck? Is it good luck on behalf of the Hanzo or the Zen or the D.Va? Is it bad luck on behalf of the people who got the short end of the stick? Is it both? If it is it equally split between the two parties, or was somebody mostly lucky or somebody mostly unlucky? Is luck something that a person can inherently personally possess, or is it something fleeting that affects anyone and everyone? Is luck even real, or is it just a mindset? When it comes to shiny Pokemon, we know the exact odds we're dealing with in any context. How often would somebody have to encounter a shiny Pokemon to be lucky? How many non-shiny Pokemon would someone have to encounter in a row before you would call them unlucky? After all, if you roll a die with 4,096 sides 4,096 times, and you roll, let's say, a 7 every single time, is that not the more statistically unlikely outcome than rolling the same die the same number of times and getting a single 1? And I do think that's actually worth exploring a little bit. Like, sure, rolling a 1 is what gets you a shiny Pokemon, but that opens a whole new can of worms because we're not just ascribing luck to statistical improbability now. We're explicitly identifying that something does not have to be the most unlikely outcome for it to be the luckiest outcome. I would argue that luck, as it's typically invoked, just refers to an outcome that was statistically unlikely and provides a substantially positive or negative impact to someone beyond what they could have expected, meaning good or bad luck respectively. If you land a random crit in Pokemon, you were lucky. If the AI lands one on you, then you were unlucky. We might ask, can an AI be lucky or unlucky? Or is some degree of sentience beyond the existence of a game itself necessary to have their own factor of luck autonomous from the player's good or bad luck? If you and I both consider finding a shiny Pokemon to be lucky, but I catch a shiny female Snorunt with the worst possible stats, while you catch a shiny male Combi with perfect IVs, we both were very lucky, but was one of us more lucky than the other? Is that affected by whether or not these are Pokemon that we might actually use in a competition? Or is it just the inherent status of them that affects whether it was more or less lucky? Or let's say you're playing Sombra and you accidentally get caught by a Widow headshot while fully invisible. You know, she didn't mean to hit you, it was pure accident. She was aiming for your teammate and she would have killed them, but since they survived, they killed her. You got unlucky, your teammate got very lucky, and it remains to be seen whether the enemy Widow or either of the teams were lucky. After all, if you would have been more impactful than your teammate was in the ensuing fight, the enemy Widow was lucky. She accidentally killed the better value target. If your team would have lost the fight with you and the enemy Widow still alive, but won with you and the enemy Widow both dead, then your team was lucky you caught a stray even though you yourself were unlucky. Part of what makes luck so hard to pin down is exactly that spiderwebbing of cause and effect, where it's impossible to isolate any individual person's luck in a given scenario most of the time. When we talked about poker, we were talking about a game where luck can simultaneously be the primary thing determining a player's odds of winning, but can also be easily trumped by other mechanics, and where it's effectively a zero-sum game. If I'm luckier than you with what comes up on the river, then even if you were theoretically lucky and had a pretty good hand, it's all rendered moot because I got better luck and a better hand. But when we talked about roulette, we were talking about a game where multiple players' luck is involved and where it isn't necessarily a zero-sum game between the players. While only one person can win a game of poker, multiple competing players in a roulette game can all win at the same time depending on how they bet, while only the house ends up being unlucky. In that scenario, though, we have to ask, is there a difference between the house being unlucky and the AI in a Pokemon game being unlucky? If there is a difference, where do we draw the line? What's the distinction between them? They're not active participants so much as just relying on the player having good or bad luck. And all that brings me to the final point of this video. Why do we like to invoke luck as a concept so often? It happens in video games constantly, but it's true pretty much everywhere. When I played hockey, a puck might take a lucky bounce off of someone's skates. Even though it's entirely explainable by physics why the puck took the path that it did, we still call it lucky that at that exact point in space and time, that skate was where it was at. Just like with the Overwatch example of a diva randomly eating somebody's ult, skill and physics and all these other things are obviously able to explain how things came to be to some extent, but they really can't get around that question of like, but why did things line up so perfectly? So I think a major part of the answer to the question comes down to the fact that human beings are fascinated by things that break the mold, that shift the pattern. We like to talk about luck because it's a factor that, at the end of the day, we can't logic away. We can rewatch it a million times and still just think like, holy shit, that was amazing. We can think back on days where we were lucky and somebody put an extra chicken nugget in our 10-piece from McDonald's and think like, damn, that was a good day, purely by chance. We also like to use luck as a bit of a catch-all to explain things away, both good and bad. How often have you been playing a game with somebody who made a genuinely really good play based in skill who tried to be humble by saying, I just got lucky? On the flip side, how often have you been playing with somebody who just got absolutely rinsed and it was an undeniable skill diff only for them to say that it was just bad luck? I know people who will claim luck in a game of darts, even though darts has so few luck-based variables that it's functionally impossible for it to come down to anything other than the person's ability. When that extra chicken nugget comes in a 10-piece meal, we like to say it's luck, but what if it wasn't? My friend went viral on Twitter a while back for admitting that he had, in fact, always snuck an extra chicken nugget into people's 10 pieces when he worked at McDonald's. In those cases, it wasn't an accident or random chance that resulted in an extra chicken nugget. Somebody made the decision to give you one. Not even just like a random decision, it's the decision they always made when faced with that scenario. But also maybe you could argue that you were still lucky because you ended up at the McDonald's where my friend worked at a time when he was on shift. Maybe if you knew him and knew that this was something he did, you could argue that it wasn't luck because you were specifically choosing that location and time because you knew you'd get an extra nugget. But if you didn't know that he existed, is that not still luck? If you knew that sometimes you got an extra nugget but not always, so you kept going there, what extent of that is luck? Neither of those answers are mutually exclusive to each other either. We don't know why we got the extra nugget, and maybe we're just unable to explain why that would happen. You know, I paid for 10, I got 11, I don't know where this extra one came from. I didn't do anything to cause this, there was no input from me that changed the output, but through some confluence of events happening beyond the veil, it still happened. I guess I just got lucky. And I think that that's a more comforting explanation to people for a lot of things, to believe that there's just this random force existing in the universe that sometimes gives you an extra nugget, or lets you hit that random spam arrow headshot, or gives you 29 shiny Pokemon in a little over 2 weeks. I think we like to believe that the world isn't just a series of raw inputs and outputs. It makes the world more exciting and dynamic to believe that luck is a force that exists. When you're lucky, you feel like you're on top of the world. Catching all these shiny Pokemon has kind of had me riding on a high because it's just like, this shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't keep happening, but it does. Something is going better than it should. But when you're unlucky, it feels like the world is sitting squarely on top of you. In the span of about 8 months, I lost an election, got COVID, lost another election, got COVID again, got salmonella from the first ever jar of Jif peanut butter I've literally ever owned while I was in COVID isolation the second time, then lost my job. It felt like the world was out to get me. Luck is so hard to pin down because by its very nature, it tends to cover all the things we can't really explain through logic. There's no logical explanation for why I managed to roll 29 ones on the 4096 sided die over 105 hours, no matter how many times I rolled it. There's no logical explanation for why Hanzo might eat a fadeaway arrow in the general direction of the enemy team as he's walking away, only for someone to turn the corner and catch it with their teeth. There's no logical explanation for why I got a better hand than you in poker. It just kinda happens. And while I think we sometimes use luck as a bit of a scapegoat when maybe we should be reflecting on whether or not there's a skill issue, there are still some times where we have to just stare out into the universe and think, damn, that was pretty lucky. Luck is talked about so casually that we forget that it truly is one of those unexplainable, undeniable forces that makes life dynamic, simply because it can't be accounted for. Maybe instead of analyzing it like this, we should just be enjoying it for what it is. A weird little quirk that makes the world a bit more exciting. Thank you so much for watching. The response to the last few videos has been wild, if I'm honest, and thank you so much for that. Part of why I wanted to talk about luck is honestly that I feel really lucky that the response to these videos has been as big as it has been. Like, I know it hasn't been that much in the grand scheme of things, but for me it is. I don't know why the algorithm decided to send you guys here, and between that and the shiny Pokemon, it's definitely had me feeling pretty lucky lately. Also, mild channel update, but I'm probably not going to be uploading gameplay videos in the future, at least not very much. Doesn't seem like that's what people want from me, at least not right now, going off of the analytics of it all, so I'm just going to save the time it takes to edit them together and focus more on the scripted side of things. If you would still like to see me play some games though, or you just want to say hi, I try to stream on Twitch every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 7 to 10 p.m. Mountain Time when I can get out from under my pile of schoolwork. In the meantime, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you soon.